Where we're sitting today in Caras Park used to be an island. The river channel widens and all that material that's carried down during floods spreads out and deposits right here in the middle of the river. And about the 1940s, there was a local fundraising effort to turn that island into a park. In fact, they called it Island Park. And shortly after Island Park was built, there was a flood season that was significant enough that it wiped out the park. From the 1950s through the early 1960s, the island just sat there as it always had. In the 60s, the Missoula was looking to replace the Higgins Avenue Bridge, and at the time the design that was proposed would have built berms out to the river, which would have impeded having car and truck traffic under the bridge. And the downtown community prevailed upon the powers that be, most notably Mike Mansfield, to get enough money from the Army Corps of Engineers to create a flood control project through downtown Missoula. And today you can see that in a dike system that goes from the Madison Street Bridge all the way down to the Orange Street Bridge. They filled in that north channel, so they created a new land-based area that was called, because of history, Island Park for many years. In 1971, the city renamed this area Caras Park in honor of James K. Caras, who was an early Missoula citizen and businessman and community builder, downtown booster. There was a parking lot and there was a strip of grass. In the late 1970s, there was a local effort called City Spirit. Citizens came together to talk about what's the future of our community. And one of the things that they recognized was that our river going through Missoula was an asset. Up to that point, we'd been using the river as a sewer and as a dump. We used car bodies for riprap. We threw our garbage and trash along the riverfront because in the early days of Missoula, nobody cared about the riverfront. That changed. One of the outcomes of the City Spirit project was a RUDAT study, which stands for Regional Urban Design Assistance Team. And it brings in land use planners, architects, designers to work with the community to come up with a plan. And one of the things that they came up with was the need to do something with Caras Park. Its location on the river in the heart of downtown made it a natural candidate to become Missoula's newest public amenity. Following that, the city did a design competition, and the winning design was submitted by a firm called KPDH, Kasperson, Pettinari, DeWolf, and Hall. And they were a team of professionals who came up with the design that is pretty much the layout of Caras Park that we know today. Now, one of the features of Caras Park in the early days was a partnership that downtown had formed with the University of Montana Rep. They had a large circus tent that they would erect every year, and the Montana Rep would do dinner theater in Caras Park on the riverfront. The park, when it was built, was designed specifically around the erection of that large circus tent. The circus tent was used for years. It was put up and taken down seasonally. It finally wore out, and the Downtown Association bought another tent until at some point the Downtown Association concluded we needed to have a permanent structure. And so the pavilion that we have that's behind me now was constructed, paid for by donors. The Downtown Association and the Missoula Redevelopment Agency put money in to build that pavilion. The pavilion was initially used pretty sparingly. We didn't know how to use Caras Park when we built it, except that we built it with flexibility in mind, with the confidence that people would figure out how to use Caras Park. One of the things the Downtown Association did to help people understand how the park could be used was they created an event called Out to Lunch. Out to Lunch was initially supervised by the Parks Department, and event planning was not their strong suit. And it was initially not very successful. So the Downtown Association took over the Out to Lunch program, then ultimately the entire management of Caras Park. The Downtown Association manages the park, schedules it, maintains it, in exchange for being able to have the revenue from using the park. very beneficial relationship for the city. One of the features of Caras Park that we thought of initially was as a venue for entertainment. And one of the things that the Downtown Association did was they sponsored a summer concert series initially. One year we had B.B. King, Santana, and their opening act was a band called Los Lobos. We had Sammy Hagar. We learned from that concerts at night, the sound carries. It bounces off the side of the Wilma building, and it goes to the neighborhood across the river. And so that ended. But creating a venue for out to lunch for entertainers, we started by building a small stage for performances and lectures. And that, like the tent, had to be erected every week for out to lunch. And that became an ongoing burden. About 10 years ago, the 20-teens, the Downtown Association erected a sheltered bandstand that allows performers to be out of the weather, to have power to amplify their music. It's been a great addition to the park and really accelerated its usefulness. Among the periphery uses of Caras Park, this is also the home of the Riverfront Market every Saturday during the summer. And it's a place where local farmers can come bring produce and other food items, including meats, cheeses, breads, flours. And it's one of Missoula's most popular Saturday morning events in the summer is the Riverfront Market. Hundreds of people walk through the market. Oftentimes there's music that accompanies that. It's not uncommon to come to the Riverfront Market, get your coffee, get a pastry, walk through, meet friends, see neighbors, enjoy another aspect of Caras Park with that market. In the 1990s, a man came to then Mayor Kemmis with a proposal: if I build a carousel, will Missoula give it a home? And that launched a carousel for Missoula, and that man was Chuck Capridge. Chuck was a wood carver, and when he made his proposal to build a carousel, he had already carved and painted 4 carousel ponies. So he proved that he could do it. He just needed the community's help. The Carousel for Missoula project was one of the finest examples that Missoula has ever seen of the community coming together to build something special, unique, and wonderful for our community. The founders couldn't imagine a better location than Caras Park for a Carousel for Missoula. The Carousel opened in 1995, and so this year will be its 30th anniversary of giving rides to children of all ages. It is one of the principal attractions for downtown Missoula. It's a place where local people bring visitors. It's a place where kids go with their parents and grandparents. It's just one of the best examples of a community coming together, volunteering, donating, doing the work to create something that at the time was unique. It was the first hand-carved carousel in America since 1928. The only thing that was paid for was the design and construction of the building that houses the carousel. Everything else was done by volunteers of Missoula. The carving of the horses, the designing of the horses, the painting of the horses, the maintenance of the mechanics of the carousel, all done by volunteers. When we say a carousel for Missoula in Caras Park, we're clearly talking about a carousel for Missoula. The Clark Fork River has historically been a source of water for 2 major ditch companies that irrigate lands to the west side of Missoula. There was historically a weir, or a water diversion project, in the Clark Fork River off the bank by Caras Park. In time, that eroded. There were pieces of metal in the river that made floating the river or boating in the river dangerous. And so a group of people who were river enthusiasts worked with the ditch companies to design a ditch diversion structure that also doubled as a kayak wave, a play wave, a standing wave here in the river. and it was designed and named for a young man from Missoula whose name was Brennan Guth. Brennan Guth was a world-class kayaker and sadly lost his life in a competition in another country. And so in his memory, this wave was created and is used today by surfers and kayakers all year round, playing on that standing wave. And it's a wonderful attraction because people enjoy watching that. In the 90s, the Missoula Redevelopment Agency constructed an overlook that gives a place for people to safely watch the surfers and kayakers as they play in the wave and do their thing in the water. Several years ago, the city and the state of Montana Department of Transportation decided it was time to rebuild the Higgins Avenue Bridge. And so the project called the Bear Tracks Bridge was created. In the process of thinking about the Bear Tracks Bridge, the Downtown Association proposed that the area under the bridge near Caras Park be returned to public use other than parking, which had been its use prior to that. And as a result, the Downtown Association has constructed a recreation area that includes a basketball hoop, ping pong tables, tables and chairs for people to sit on, cornhole courts. There's another way to create opportunities for the people to use this park. When we have events like Out to Lunch and Downtown Tonight that attract crowds, people will oftentimes go over and enjoy these additional recreational opportunities, still listening to the music, still enjoying a meal and recreation with their friends and family. The pavilion is owned and managed by the Downtown Association. And in addition to the many events that they host in it in the summer months, they also host an annual brew fest where regional brewers come and they put their beers out for sampling. And they have a winter brew fest and a brew fest in the spring. Because our park is used beneficially by many, many, many groups. Political rallies. For example, when Bernie Sanders came to talk in Missoula, what better place than at Caras Park, which he did.
Thank you, Missoula!
And it was another example of how the People's Park is being used to benefit the public. But the pavilion is available for other use too. Companies often will have a company picnic here. The Downtown Association has their annual barbecue here. People will rent it out as a place to get married, have parties, wedding anniversary celebrations, and family reunions. But festivals, public gatherings, the annual Wild Walk Parade ends in Caras Park. Oftentimes, there will be celebrations that show up here. It's just a facility that we made it flexible enough that we allow people to invent ways to use it, and they do. One of the premier events is the annual Symphony in the Park that's put on by the Missoula Symphony Association. The Missoula Symphony comes to the park usually in August and puts on a free concert in the park. And this event draws thousands of people to Caras Park. It's always the best quality music. It allows people to get out, have a picnic in the park, listen to music, meet up with friends, celebrate everything that's good about our community here. And that's a tradition that's been going on for almost 20 years now, I think. It's always a hit. People are grateful for the opportunity to hear our magnificent symphony as they give the gift of music back to Missoula. And where else would they do it but Caras Park? The use of Caras Park is generally free. It's a public park. But to use the facilities, the pavilion and other parts of the park for events is required that permission be given by the Downtown Association, which is fairly easy to get. There are costs involved that are part of managing the park, and all those costs are part of the permitting fees that users pay in order to be able to have access to the park. But those funds keep the park functioning, keep it clean, and keep the materials that we use in it, the furniture and so on, in good shape. And in this case, it's the Downtown Association that is in charge of taking care of the park and making sure that it's used beneficially for the people of Missoula. Caras Park is not a static place. There are plans to make improvements to the park. Among those are the creation of what's called an ice ribbon. Rather than a rink that you can skate around and play hockey on, an ice ribbon is basically a big undulating loop of ice that you can skate around, and that will be a seasonal use. When it's not being used as an ice ribbon, it will probably be able to be used for a small BMX track in the non-winter months so kids can come down and ride on their bikes. Other plans for the park include improving the entrances to the park on Ryman Street. Caras Park, unfortunately, does not really have a formal entrance, and that's one of the things that has been lacking. To the east part of Caras Park, there are plans to improve Caras Park on into adjoining park, Bess Reed Park. So there'll be additional amenities, art sculptures, and so on in the park to, again, further improve the public's use of their park. All of these things will take place probably in the next 10 years, and 9 years from now, we'll be planning the 10 years after that. Most recently, the Downtown Association, working with the city, was able to secure a $1.9 million grant, and in the next year or so, the riverfront on Caras Park is going to be refashioned and improved to allow handicapped access to the river through a ramping system, and it's going to help control the access to the river that has resulted heretofore in a lot of erosion. This project will make it easier for the public to access the river while guarding the flood control levee system that we have. So things are always happening in Caras Park. One of the values of the people who operate in the park, who oversee the park, is making it better, constant improvement, doing what we can to make this place a public place that the public can enjoy, whether it's on trails, entertainment for programs that are held here, whether it is just simply a place to come and enjoy public space. That's what Caras Park is all about. We're lucky that it's located in Missoula. We're lucky that it's located on the riverfront. And we're lucky that we've had generations of people who care about this place and are constantly looking to make it better.